Hello students, welcome to SRM Biology classes. Today's topic is with reference to major abiotic factors. The four important major abiotic factors that determines life activities on the earth surface are namely temperature, water, light and soil are the four important major abiotic factors that determines the wide variety of life forms on the earth surface. In the last class, we have studied with reference to the main important salient features of the first major abiotic component called temperature. Today, I will explain the role of water and light as major abiotic factors in determination of wide variety of life forms on the earth surface. The second important major abiotic factor is called water. Water is called liquid of life. As a result of descent with modification, the water is indigenously originated on the earth surface at the initial stages of earth formation. The water, it exists in all the four distinctive phases, namely solid, liquid, gaseous, and given in the plasma status, you can find the presence of water. The master molecule is called DNA. The DNA shows high degree of affinity towards water. Because of this unique characteristic feature, the water is popularly designated as liquid of life. The water is said to be one of the major abiotic factors that influence wide variety of life organisms on the earth surface. In determination of type of vegetational coverage on the earth surface, the major abiotic component very essential is called water. In order to sustain wide variety of life forms on the earth surface, we need the essentiality of water. The life is mainly originated in the marine ecosystem. The marine ecosystem is one of the biggest ecosystem on the earth surface because the 2/3 of the earth surface is captured by the presence of marine water. You can find the presence of marine water. The water it exists on the earth surface in the form of oceans, seas, rivers, lakes, ponds, pools, ditches are some of the important major water resources. In the polar region, you can find the presence of ice caps and ice glaciers. They are the major contributor of water. Its availability is very limited in desertic conditions. Even in the mountain ranges also, the availability of the water is very less. By exhibiting the phenomenon of adaptation, wide variety of living organisms, they started to survive in that particular geographical area. Especially in case of aquatic animals, the water quality, the nutrients present in the water is the determining factor. With a continuous dumping of sewage water, industrial effluents into the surrounding water bodies, the self-purification power of the water is subjected to depletion, thereby the freshwater bodies are slowly gets converted into polluted water. With the loss of self-purification power, all the living organism present in that particular water body is subjected to depletion, resulting in series of consequences, namely algal blooming, eutrophication, are some of the effects exhibited by the sewage water with a in cooperation with the addition of organic nutrients into the water. Water has also influenced the productivity and distribution of plants on the surface. Especially in case of Bryophytes and in case of Pteridophytes, water is very essential in order to reproduce. In addition to this, in distribution of living organisms across the globe, water is one of the main means of distribution. In this case, the availability of the fresh water on the surface is limited to 1%. The rest of the water, it is existed in the form of marine water, in the form of oceans and in the form of seas. The salt concentration is measured in parts per thousand in the water bodies, especially in the inland water. The water that is present in the inner folds of the earth crust is called inland water. In case of inland water, the salinity is up to 5 parts per thousand. In case of seas, you can find it as a salty concentration ranging from 30 to 35%. Whereas in case of hypersaline lagoons, the salty concentration exceeds more than 100. This is with reference to the salinity. The salinity is taken into consideration in order to classify the water into two important types, namely fresh water and marine water. Only 1% of the water is the marine, is the fresh water. The remaining 99% of the water is existed in the form of marine water. Because of this unique characteristic feature, one of the biggest ecosystem on the earth's surface is called the marine ecosystem. Is the marine ecosystem based on the salinity tolerance. Salinity refers to the presence of salty concentration. Based on the salinity tolerance is taken into consideration to classify the living organisms into two important types, namely euryhaline and stenohaline. Haline refers to the salt-loving plants are called halophytes. The salt-loving plants are called salt-loving plants are called halophytes. Based on the salinity tolerance is taken into consideration in order to classify the living organisms into two important types, namely euryhaline and stenohaline. With reference to the main important features of euryhaline are the organisms which tolerate, as I earlier said, eury refers to what? Which can tolerate wide range of salinity. Such a type of organisms are called euryhaline. One of the classical example for euryhaline is the salmon fish. The salmon fish is one of the classical example for euryhaline organism. In case of salmon fish, it will take its birth in the fresh water. Major part of the life is normally spent in the marine ecosystem. At the time of reproduction, again it takes its backward journey to the place of birth, namely to the freshwater body. Such a unique type of journey from freshwater to marine, marine to freshwater is seen in case of salmon fish. It will survive in both freshwater and also in the marine water because it shows wide range of salinity tolerance. The second important one is called steno-align. Steno-align are the organisms which are restricted to narrow range of salinity, Such a type of organisms are called steno-align. Steno refers to narrow. Haline refers to salty. They are restricted to narrow range of salinity. Such a type of organisms are called steno-align. One of the classical example for steno-align is called shark. Shark, it is naturally confined to marine ecosystem. If it is listed the freshwater ecosystem, either due to exosmosis or endosmosis, the organism is subjected to death. Many freshwater animals cannot survive in the seawater. As a result of either exo or endosmosis, the organisms are subjected to death. One of the classical examples for steno-align is shark. It is restricted to narrow range of salinity. Slight fluctuation in the salty concentration led to the death of the organism. This is with reference to the main important features of one of the major abiotic component called water. The next important one is called light. The sunlight is the supreme source of light energy on the Earth's surface. In determination of optimum temperature on the Earth's surface, the light will play a very important role. Through electromagnetic spectrum, the light energy is delivered onto the Earth's surface. In this case, the photosynthetically active radiation refers to PAR, photosynthetically active range, ranging from 400 to 700 nanometer, will play a very important role in exhibiting maximum amount of productivity on the Earth's surface, especially to the green plants, starting from algae to angiosperms. They require sunlight in order to exhibit the biochemical reaction called photosynthesis. Through photosynthesis, the light energy will get converted into chemical form of energy. Once the chemical form of energy is synthesized, by exhibiting the phenomenon of eating and being eaten, the energy is transferred to successive tropic levels, or the energy is transferred across the food chain. The radiation, the electromagnetic radiation, is transferred onto the Earth's surface. At the time of transferring the electromagnetic radiation on the Earth's surface, the presence of ozone layer in the stratosphere will play a very important role in effective screening of ultraviolet radiation. With the effective filtration of ultraviolet radiation, only the visible light ranging from 400 to 700 nanometer is effectively delivered onto the Earth's surface in order to exhibit productivity on the Earth's surface. Radiation below the visible light called ultraviolet radiation. Radiation above the visible light is called infrared light or heat waves. They play a very important role in disturbing the life activities on the Earth's surface. It does not impact on the productivity. It exhibits lethal effects on the living organisms. Both ultraviolet and infrared light or the heat waves will play a very important role in exhibiting lethal effects on the living organisms. At the time of analyzing the light, the duration of the light, the intensity of the light and the quality of the light, followed by the altitude, and based on the season, the duration, the intensity, the amount, and the quality of light will play a very important role in determination of wide variety of life forms on the Earth's surface. With reference to the importance of light for the plants, the light is very essential in order to exhibit the phenomenon of photosynthesis, starting from algae to angiosperms, especially in order to exhibit autotrophic mode of nutrition. In case of green plants, we need the essentiality of light. Light, by exhibiting the phenomenon of photosynthesis, it will get converted into chemical form of energy in the form of glucose, based on the light intensity. The plants are divided into two important types, namely Heliophytes, and the second one is called Ceophytes. The Heliophytes are called high intensity light loving plants. High intensity light loving plants are called Heliophytes. One of the classical example for Heliophytes are the sunflower. The scientific name of sunflower is Helianthus anus. It requires high intensity of sunlight. The second important one is called Ceophytes. The Ceophytes are called shade-loving plants. They require low intensity of sunlight. Majority of the ferns, bryophytes, they normally prefer very low intensity of sunlight. They require very low intensity of sunlight. Many species of small plants, namely herbs and shrubs, confined to the forest, they are adapted to photosynthetic in an optimum rate because of the presence of very low intensity of sunlight. In such a conditions, you can expect the luxuriant growth and proliferation of Ceophytes. In the forest ecosystem, because of the presence of top canopied tree forms, or because of the presence of tall trees, very low intensity of sunlight is reaches to the bottom of the forest floor. In such a conditions, it prefers the survival of herbs and shrubs that are exposed to the low intensity of sunlight. In such a geographical area, you can find the presence of bryophytes, certain algae, and also you can find the presence of pteridophytes in such a geographical area. With reference to importance of light to the animals, many animals, it requires diurnal nature, and they exhibit seasonal variation based on the light intensity and duration of the light. It is popularly designated as photoperiod. It will play a very important role in the presence of light. Light will play a very important role in exhibiting the foraging behavior in case of animals, in order to exhibit the reproductive pattern, and also in order to exhibit migratory behavior in case of birds. We need the essentiality of light. With a sudden decrease in the light intensity in the Arctic and in the Antarctic zonation led to the exhibition of migratory behavior in case of majority of the pelicans. In each and every year from Siberia, majority of the crane varieties, they move towards the warmer areas where they receive high intensity of sunlight. As a result, majority of the migratory birds in each and every year, they move towards the Rajasthan. The Rajasthan is scattered by the presence of Bharatpur National Park and Kiloba National Park. They meant for receiving the migratory bird from the polar regions. They meant for receiving the migratory birds from the polar region. With a change in the light intensity followed by the temperature, it exhibits reproductive behavior, thereby the male birds exhibit courtmanship, thereby it will normally take part in reproduction. Soon after the approach of the favorable condition, again these birds, they take a backward journey to the native place. In order to exhibit migratory behavior, in order to exhibit the foraging behavior, followed by the reproductive behavior, we need the essentiality of light, especially in case of animals. The availability of light on the land is closely linked to the temperature. Since the sun is the supreme source of energy, with the help of electromagnetic radiation, the light energy is delivered onto the surface. If you observe the deep of the ocean, in the deep of the ocean, you can't expect the presence of light. In such a conditions, all the deep sea-dwelling organisms, they completely lack the eyes. They does not aware of the existence of sunlight. They are unaware of the existence of the sunlight. Such a unique type of behavioral change is seen in case of deep sea dwelling animals. In such a deep sea dwelling organism, the eyes are completely absent. They are unaware of the celestial source of energy of sun. Such a unique type of behavior is seen in case of deep sea dwelling organisms. In addition to this, in order to exhibit rapid multiplication of decomposers and consumers, it requires the essentiality of intensity of sunlight. For converting large and complex substances into simpler derivatives, the light will play a very important role. In the visible spectrum, the ultraviolet radiation and the infrared radiation is very lethal to the living organism. If you observe the types of the ultraviolet radiation, you can find the presence of three types of ultraviolet radiation, namely ultraviolet radiation A, B and C. In this case, the ultraviolet C category of radiation is very lethal to the living organisms, whereas ultraviolet B is quite harmful, whereas ultraviolet A is moderately harmful to the human beings and to the other living entities on the surface. Marine plants living at different depths of the ocean do not receive the intensity of the sunlight. Based on the receiving of light intensity and based on the vertical and horizontal distribution of red, green and brown light is taken into consideration in order to classify the algae into three important types, namely chlorophytes, Phaeophytes and rhodophycean members. Chlorophycean members are called green algae. Rhodophycean algal members are called red algae. Phaeophycean members are called brown algae. Based on the vertical and horizontal distribution of red, green and brown light will play a very important role in chromatic adaptation in case of majority of the algal forms. Majority of the algal forms. If you observe the distribution of, red algae, the red algae extended to the great depth and it is the major primary producer in the marine ecosystem. Whereas the green light is effectively absorbed by the red algae. As a result, the red algae is extended to the great depth and it is the major producer in the marine ecosystem. In addition to this, if you observe the green algae, it mainly absorbs blue and red wavelength of the light. The green algae which absorb blue and red wavelength of the light and it is diminishedly and it is rapidly spread in the seawater on the upper surface. If you observe the brown algae, it will normally absorb intermediate wavelength of the light. It effectively absorbs the intermediate wavelength of the light. Because of this unique characteristic feature, in each and every marine ecosystem, you can expect the presence of brown algae because it normally absorbs the intermediate wavelength of the light and it is confined to intermediate depth. Such a unique type of chromatin adaptation is seen in case of marine algal forms. It is purely depends upon the type of the light wavelength effectively absorbed by the photosynthetic pigment. The next important aspect is with reference to the distribution of light zonation in case of lake aquatic system. If you observe the lake as one of the classical example for aquatic ecosystem, the compensation point of light and oxygen levels in the lake ecosystem is explained in this following figure, in this following diagram. If you observe the lake as an aquatic ecosystem, the sunlight is the supreme source of energy. Through with the help of electromagnetic radiation, it is distributed, the light energy is distributed up to diphotic region, or it is distributed to the diphotic region. If it is confined to the upper region, led to the formation of littoral. In the intermediate zonation, you can find the presence of limnitic zone. In that limnitic zone, the light will favor the luxuriant growth and proliferation of wide variety of phytoplankton derivatives. Thereby, you can expect the elevated presence of the oxygen. In the profundal region, the light does not enter. Because of this unique characteristic feature, you can't expect the presence of any phytoplankton derivatives. Phytoplankton refers to the unicellular or the multicellular algal forms. Does not confine to profundal zone because the light does not enter into that particular zone. In the benthic zone, you can find the presence of complete darkness. It does not support any phytoplankton derivatives. In such a geographical area, in such a zonation, you can find the presence of and heterotrophic organisms, you can find the presence of heterotrophic organism. The heterotrophic organisms born without eyes. Such a unique type of zonation is seen in case of benthic zone. Just to remember, littoral zone is the floating zonation. Benthic, it is confined to bottom. It is confined to bottom of the lake ecosystem. The littoral zone is exposed to the wavelength action, thereby you can expect the high productivity in the littoral zone, characterized by the presence of floating phytoplankton derivatives. The second important one is the limnitic zone. In the limnitic zone, you can find the presence of open water body rich in phytoplankton. Because of the presence of high concentration of phytoplankton derivatives, the amount of oxygen liberation through photolysis of water by the phytoplankton derivatives is very high. The released oxygen is effectively consumed by the wide variety of heterotrophic organisms present in that aquatic ecosystem. The next important one is called Euphotic Zone. The euphotic zone receives maximum light above the compensation point. And you can expect the wide variety of phytoplankton derivatives. The next one is called Diphotic zone. It receives the diffuse sunlight. Below the light compensation point. Up to the diphotic region, you can expect the penetration of light. Below that, you can find the presence of two important zones, namely profundal zone and the benthic zone. Profundal zone is the dark zone. No light traces are seen in the profundal zone. Thereby, you can't expect the presence of phytoplanktons in the profundal zone. The last one is the benthic zone. It is confined to, benthic refers to bottom zone of the lake ecosystem. You can find the presence of perpetual darkness. You can find the presence of complete darkness in such a geographical area. You can expect the heterotrophic organisms in that particular geographical area. This is with reference to the zonation in the deep lake, showing the gradient of light and oxygen for the differential distribution of different varieties of aquatic organisms. This is with reference to light zonation of lake ecosystem. This is with reference to the main important features of major abiotic factors, namely water and soil. In the next class, I will explain the role of soil as a major abiotic factor. Thank you very much.